All right. Hey, everybody. This is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. So today I have Chris from Stories and Cardboard. How you doing, Chris?
Good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm actually really glad to have you on today because there's a lot of vintage football stuff that I wanted to um, get you to talk about, and I think you're the perfect person for the job. So. Um, I do have a set of questions here,
Okay.
and first, before I do that, I just want to um, and I want to find out how you actually got into um, sports cards and football cards. In fact,
Yeah. So football cards were the first cards that I bought. Essentially, like most '80s kid, like late '70s, early '80s kids, I played a lot of video games. Spent a lot of time in the arcades and stuff like that. And one day during Christmas break, I had a mom that worked at the local mall here, and so I went with her to play video games during Christmas break in 1980. And on my way back, so there was an arcade in the back of a drugstore. It's actually a GC Murphy. And on my way back there, it's kind of, rushing, trying to get back there. And this box of cards just kind of caught my eye. And I was like, oh, wow, 25 cents. So I think I bought a couple of packs and opened them up and was pretty much hooked instantly and just kind of went back and spent all my arcade money on packs of football cards that day.
that's awesome. Do you have a favorite card, right?
Uh, so the picture that I show on my channel on my profile picture there, that's the first card I remember getting in a pack, the Tony Hill card. And but as far as favorite cards, well, I mean, my favorite card is a baseball card that I own, and that's the 1956 Topps Mickey Mantle.
Oh wow.
Even though I'm a big football guy, that is my favorite card.
Wow, that is a beautiful card. I think Topps really kind of outdid themselves and between in 1951 and 1957. That's such a great card.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
real classic for sure.
yeah, I didn't know that you were really into baseball.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say if I were to rank them right now, as far as what I am mostly enjoying, I would go baseball, or I'm sorry, football, hockey, and baseball, and then probably basketball.
oh, okay.
I haven't bought a whole lot of basketball recently because, as you and I have kind of talked, I'm kind of working on those early Bowman football sets, and
Yeah.
that keeps me pretty busy and tied up budget wise.
So let's talk about Bowman because
Okay.
we both really love Bowman. What are your thoughts on the early Bowman cards, football at least?
I mean, I think they're the best cards out there. I think they're the most beautiful cards. I love just the artwork on them and the history behind the company, and also just the way it kind of like the production of those early football cards really kind of coincides with the growth of the NFL. The NFL really started growing post-war after World War II. And that's when football really kind of started taking off. You had more people getting TVs in their home and things like that, and it really kind of combined like this whirlwind of really popularizing the sport.
Yeah, there was the 1950 Rams, the Admiral set, which you
Yes.
don't really see all that often. Uh, that kind of tells you that TV is really becoming a huge thing in the 1950s, and I think you had actually told me that uh, the that was like one of the first sets that to have the Rams, right? And there are some pretty rare cards in that set. A couple of rookie cards too, in fact, right?
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with the set overall, like who's in it. So rookie cards, I know Elroy Hirsch is in there, and I believe Tom Fears is in there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there you don't. I mean, you don't see those very often at all.
No,
I have them on my watch list on eBay, and they never come up other than these two that are just beat to death, and they are priced really high.
yeah, they first off, I mean, I think we were talking earlier that the older ball players from say the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, these guys aren't really talked about all that often. And it's usually the modern ball players that are being talked about the most, and these other guys are really being just kind of put on the wayside. And this kind of bothers me, to tell you the truth, because if you don't have if you don't have educated collectors, they're not going to purchase these cards. And I actually I do have a couple of Bowmans here. Let me just show you like one player in particular, and do you
Oh yeah,
recognize who that is?
oh yeah, Steve Van Buren.
Yeah, and he's really underrated today, which in his day he wouldn't have been, right?
Right. He would have been the hot rookie today for sure.
Yeah, and the artwork on these is amazing. Probably the best that I've ever seen on a card.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
yeah, and so do you have any favorite Bowmans in particular from like
Man,
51 to
I tell you what,
no.
I like a lot of them. Oh man, that's a tough question. Like trying to tell me to pick between children or something. Um,
Yeah.
gosh, I mean, as far as sets go, I really like the 51 Bowmans a lot. Um, man, gosh, I wouldn't say I have a favorite. I will tell you an obscure card that I do like a lot, and that is the 1951 Bowman Jack Zilly card, who he played for the Rams. If you've never seen that card, it's a card where he's kind of laying out, kind of in a just kind of a horizontal, kind of like he's diving for the football, and the
I
football's
have
out in
it.
front of him,
Yeah, it's a
and
great card.
and you see the grass kind of flying up off of the ground, and I don't know. I just love that card. To me, it's not all just about the players, but I like just the looks of the cards and kind of the artwork, and that's one of the real beauties, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the one of the key selling points I think for Bowman back in the day was to have amazing artwork, because when if you didn't, you're not going to sell your product, because cards were not the product back in the 1950s and 1960s. And if you have cards like this, you're definitely gonna
Yeah,
have kids going buy more. And I know it bothered parents back in the day too, to keep on having to buy their kids all this stuff, and they didn't really understand it, right?
right, right.
So Sammy Baugh here, he is not underrated, and people still talk about him, but they don't talk about him enough, in
Right.
my opinion. And same with um, the Chicago Bears quarterback as well, Sid Luckman.
Yeah.
I think Sid Luckman is really he's been really kind of forgotten about today, but he was an amazing quarterback.
5 championships, right? Wasn't it 5? He won 5 NFL championships. Is that right? Or was
Yeah.
it 4?
So
Oh,
we got he won in 1940 against Sammy Baugh in the 73-0.
yeah. Right.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a
You
fly
count
in the
for
wall.
2, right? That should count for 2.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And then what, 1940? I know 42 and 43, right?
43. Okay. Who won in
Um,
45? Didn't the Bears win in 45, or was that no? That was the Cleveland Rams won in 45.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That we kind of tend to forget that the Rams were in Cleveland
Yeah, they
up
started out in
until
Cleveland.
World War II. And then after, I think the war had ended in like 1946 or something. They ended up leaving right in 45,
Yeah,
46.
yeah.
Um,
After that
Football.
championship, I think they left. I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Was there any? Do you know of any reason why they went to Los Angeles from Cleveland?
I think finances, like the owner, Dan Reeves at the time, just kind of saw more potential, just bigger market and that kind of thing is, I think, what it boiled down to.
Okay. This is a kind of a period of time in football history that you have a lot of teams that are either merging or they're leaving or they're folding all together. And you know the Yankees, and the Dodgers, those two teams are they're really kind of interesting to me, And then I think you have the Texans, right? The Yankees became the Texans. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep. They ultimately became the Texans.
Yeah.
And they folded after 1 year because they were just probably the worst team that ever existed.
Speaking of worst teams, the 1950s Packers. This is a team that I find really kind of interesting too, especially in 1958 when I think they won one game
Mhm.
and they had some amazing ball players on those teams that really I think had to wait for a very long time, or are still waiting, in fact, to get in the Hall of Fame. And Billy Houghton is one of those players. Do you have any thoughts on Billy Houghton at all?
Oh, yes. I do. Yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the best receivers of that era. I mean, he arguably was maybe the third best. What was it? I think he, during the 50s, had the most receiving yards of any receiver during the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that, either first or second. And
Yeah,
uh, right up there with touchdowns as well. And the thing about the Packers in the 1950s is they were the only football team that had no television. They had no one that was covering their TV games because they were such a small market.
really.
Yeah, so they really struggled in that area. You had in 1950, you had the Rams and the Redskins were the first teams to have every one of their games televised. And then you had Dumont Broadcasting Company. They came in 1951, and they bought the rights to the NFL championship game. And then after that, they started kind of televising games. Televised games started becoming more popular, and back then it was more of a regionalized situation where you depended on local TV stations to carry your games and local sponsors and things like that. And the Packers were such a small market; they had no TV games at all.
That's that's I wonder if that's why because of the bad play too. I wonder if that's why some of the players from the 1950s just haven't gotten into the Hall of Fame. I think Bobby Dillon had to wait 50 years
Yeah,
to get in, and it's really not their fault. Um, I think you have maybe at least three Packers that should get in the Hall of Fame, and they haven't just because they were on bad ball clubs. And this is prior to Vince Lombardi, right? So
yeah.
when did Vince?
Things changed once he got there, obviously.
Yeah, he wasn't he one of the coaches for the Giants?
Yeah, he
Is
was
that
an assistant for the New York Giants. He and Tom Landry worked on the same staff. And then Lombardi got the head coaching job in 1960 with the Green Bay Packers.
and that's how that's how he got his job through Lombard. Was it how did he get this job again?
As far as Lombardi, I don't know. I think he just interviewed, just kind of the normal process. I don't think it was through any special means, but I'm not real sure about that.
Okay.
But I know
Um,
he was obviously, in 1956, the Giants won the NFL championship. So both he and Tom Landry had kind of become hot commodities, if you will, for head coaching positions.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I never saw Landry as a coach. I was really only a kind of a Patriots fan. and so I missed him, and I know he passed away in 1991. But I did end up picking up his rookie card, and I'm trying to find it here.
Yeah, that's,
I picked up
that's
I
a good
picked up his yeah, you saw it. Oh, here it is. Um, Let me show you really quickly. The Landry here. This is a card that I've been looking for almost 20 years, and I finally picked it up at the National. But it's to me, it's a really beautiful card, and again, this shows off George Mall and what that agency could do with artwork,
yeah.
and it's really, again, you have to have great artwork as well to sell these cards, and if you don't have it, it's the it's not going to work out very well.
Yeah.
There's another ball player too that I wanted to kind of get your opinion on, and it's this man right here, Al Wistert.
Worcester, yeah, yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame. But you know, I'm a big Hall guy, so. But yes, he was all decade 1940s, right?
Yeah,
Was it 50s?
it's 1940s.
40s, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, he should definitely be in. I will tell you something. So I know on a lot of his Bowman, or on all of his Bowman cards, it calls him Whitey, but that was actually his brother. He's not actually Whitey Wister. That was actually one of his brothers. I think they had three brothers that all played football at Michigan, and Bowman actually got that incorrect.
That's do you have any thoughts on why he's not in the Hall of Fame?
I mean, just in general, I think a lot of those older guys have been overlooked, and a lot of it is, baseball is a stat driven sport. And even if you didn't see people play, you can look at stats of baseball players and get an idea of who was really good. And even for the position players like quarterback and running back, you can't do that in football because the game was so different then.
Right.
And it was just completely different. And not only was the game different, but you also had that aspect of players weren't getting paid what they get paid today, right? So most of them didn't stick around very long because they went and got a job that paid better.
Yeah, he was criticized too by his other teammates for taking I think it was a $6,000 check from the club, and I think it made him the highest paid player at the time, and I forget exactly when that was. I think it was 1941 or 42 or so. Um, but yeah, they criticized him pretty heavily for that.
Yeah.
But I also want to think too that because the Eagles in the 1940s were such there was a really dominant team, and they were kind of like the Brooklyn Dodgers, if you will, of football, and they were such a star-stacked team that Worcester really may have been like I
Overlooked.
kind of want to I kind of want to say he's the Gil Hodges of football.
Mm,
That he's just been really overshadowed by his other teammates.
mm-hmm.
So it's someday maybe I hope he gets in. So Brandon Ryan, hello. Let's see, tough generation, incredible how long they lasted. Yes. It's football is definitely a different sport in the 1940s and 30s and the 50s, right? And even in the 1960s. I I heard a crazy story where I think it was a Bart Starr or Johnny Unitas, where the first day he ended up on the field, there was a glass all over it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Playing conditions were not the field conditions were not good at all. I think
yeah.
that's Johnny Unitas that you're thinking about. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I heard that. I heard that story, and I was like, Wow, like that would never that would never happen today,
yeah.
ever."
When you see these guys playing on the fields, when you look at these old films, and there's really no grass. I mean, they're playing on dirt. There's hardly any grass on these fields. When they get tackled, you have these big kind of dust clouds that fly up, and I mean that couldn't have been fun, getting tackled and dirt getting in your eye and your mouth and everywhere else.
Yeah. There was, I think I showed it to you too. There was a couple of clips from the 1930s and 40s of the NFL games, and I'm kind of surprised that a lot of these guys are my build. I'm like 150 pounds, and it was just like an average everyday Joe playing football back then. It's also really fascinating too to watch these old games and the old championships too, especially the Browns. I'm a real big fan of Paul Brown.
Yeah, I am too.
And yeah, do you have any thoughts on Paul Brown or the Browns?
Yeah, Paul Brown. I mean, he is kind of credited with a lot of just kind of the administrative stuff that has been brought into football that is still used today. I think he was the first coach to use game film as a study guide, and a few other things too. He was just really innovative, and he was very much a disciplinarian too. But he was one of the best for sure.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Bowman added him to their set. And
All those
unfortunately,
coaches.
yeah, there's a lot of really great coaches in that
Mhm.
set, and a lot of people they don't really realize this that there's another one, George Hallis,
Yeah,
who's in that set, and Buddy Parker as well.
yeah.
And do you
Joe
have any
Joe Stidahar or Stidahar, I'm not sure
Joe
how you pronounce
Steinhardt? Yeah, Joe Steinhardt is also
it. Yeah,
in that
he's in the
set.
Hall of Fame as well.
There was
Wayne
another.
Milner of the Eagles. I think he's in there as a player, but he was a coach for the Eagles for a short period of time.
Oh,
Wayne Milner.
really?
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite coach cards from that set?
I tell you, well, I definitely like the George Hallis. Um, I like the Paul Brown. Uh, I actually like the Buck Shaw quite a bit. And because Buck Shaw, he was the first coach for the San Francisco 49ers. So he was their very first coach when they were in the AAFC. And then he was also the coach for the Philadelphia Eagles when they won the NFL championship in 1960. So he was a really, really good coach. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame personally.
I'm all for that. It's funny you mentioned 1960 because the Eagles card, I believe, what 1950 is it 1956? The Eagles card or 1960 Eagles tops card with Norm Van Brocklin.
Rockland, yeah.
It's the only. Is it the only card that he's on where he's shown as an Eagle?
I think he might actually be on the 1959 Tops team card also.
Okay.
It's essentially the exact same picture, though. If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
There's a lot of players on those team cards that you're not going to find on any regular card too. I just unfortunately I would collect those, but it's kind of hard to see the face of the player,
Yeah,
and you can only tell really because of the uniform numbers.
yeah.
But Norm Van Brocklin's another great quarterback that I think is kind of overshadowed today or underrated, you know.
Big time.
And yeah, and
He
there's a
still holds the record for most passing yards in a game.
really
Still to this day, 1951. He set the record in 1951. And even in a pass happy NFL these days, he still holds that record.
wow.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
amazing.
That yeah, I remember you had shown a 1956 Norm Van Brocklin on your show,
Mhm.
and I said I have to get that card.
Yeah, it's really
That yeah, you show a lot of really great cards on your channel, and I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with what you've been able to accomplish, and um, there's another quarterback I want to show you as well. actually two of them. So this is Bob Waterfield,
Yes.
and he's another guy that you don't really hear too much about these days.
Who was it he was married to? I'm drawing a blank. He was married to
That's a oh
the
man,
actress.
yeah, Jane.
It
I want
wasn't
to say
it wasn't
that.
Mansfield. It
No,
was
but I'm thinking that
I
Jane
know.
Russell. Jane Russell.
Yes, there you go. There you
Yeah. Um. Yeah. They were married for quite some time, which is kind of unusual for a Hollywood actress and
go.
a sports figure. But he's someone who really isn't talked about all that often today. And then another player is Charlie Connolly,
Oh yeah.
and this is one of my favorite cards. I absolutely love this card, and I'm always hoping that Charlie Connolly will get in the Hall of Fame. What do you think? Do you think that he will get in the Hall of Fame someday?
Probably not, but I think he should. But yeah, unfortunately, I think for a lot of these guys, especially the guys that have been passed away for a number of years, there's just not enough guys kind of championing their cause, and yeah, it's really unfortunate. But he was a great, great player.
Yeah, yeah. He was very quiet too, which is one of the reasons maybe why he probably won't get in. I'm really hoping he does. And that brings me to this question right here. Do you think because of the Pro Bowl and the All Star game, they used to be factors in Hall of Fame consideration, and it's looking more and more like players are not going to the Pro Bowl or the All Star games anymore.
Right?
Um, do you do you see that as a factor going forward for players to get in the Hall of Fame? Because it used to show an outstanding performance or excellence in their field, and if they're not going in if they're not going to these events, then collectors might say, well, they didn't go to any Pro Bowls or anything. But what do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it may be a factor for some of your non-skilled players, like offensive linemen and people like that, and kind of defensive line maybe, and some linebackers. It could potentially hurt them. I'd never really thought about that before.
Yeah, I think well, Tom Brady is pretty famous for not going to the
Yeah.
Pro Bowl.
I don't think he has to worry about that being an
Yeah,
issue for him.
he doesn't. Some players probably do, but wasn't the Pro Bowl was it there was a huge gap there too, right? Or I think in the late 1940s or 50s there wasn't a Pro Bowl. At
Yeah,
least,
I'm not real familiar with much of the Pro Bowl. Like I have literally never watched a Pro Bowl football game in my life. I just think they're pointless, and they're even worse now. Someone told me they
right.
had a flag football game this year for the Pro Bowl, and I'm just okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I think it may have been a huge factor. Same with the All Star game. In fact, for baseball, there used to be two All Star games, and one was a benefit um, to provide financial assistance to the ball players as they retire. So that stopped in about 1962, I think. And today the players aren't even showing up for the hitting contests.
Yeah,
So and I can understand why they're not doing this too, because if they hit so many home runs, then they're not going to be hitting home runs after the All Star game too, right?
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's the way it is. Um, But I have another question here. So, Professional Football Researchers Association, or PFRA, the Hall of the Very Good,
All of
they have, I believe, 130 players on their selection there, and they actually have four candidates that they're selected that they're supporting for the Hall of Fame. Two of these guys have already gotten in, and that's Duke Slater and who's the other one? Max Speedy. But Al Wistert and Laverne Delwig are the other two.
Packers.
Yeah, and so um,
I think all those guys on that list should be in, but that's just me. Again, I'm a big Hall guy.
yeah, I am too. I am too. There's actually I counted this, and there's 167 names, and 28 of those guys have been enshrined.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to see all those guys get in because I think that they're definitely deserving. And do you have any favorite players that you'd love to get into the Hall of Fame?
I'm not sure he's on that list. He should be if he's not, but I'm a big Tobin Rote fan of the Green Bay Packers and Detroit
Yeah, me too.
Lions, and played for the Chargers and the AFL. I'm a big Tobin Rote fan. I like Wistert a lot. Oh man, if I had that list in front of me, I could probably rattle off some names, but I'm trying to think of some other guys. Charlie Connerly's probably on that list, right?
He is, and Tobin Road is too. I think his cousin is as
Kyle,
well.
Kyle Rote.
Kyle,
Yeah.
yeah.
Trying to think of some other guys. Gosh, name some names off for me.
Let's see if I can. Frankie Albert
Oh
is
yeah,
as
Frankie
well.
Albert,
Um, I can't.
left-handed quarterback.
Yeah, I don't have. Unfortunately, I don't have the list in front of me. But it was everybody
Is
from
Jimmy Patton on that list? I
he
wonder.
is he is.
Okay, okay.
Um, yeah. Let's talk about Jimmy Patton for a minute. So he unfortunately got killed in a car crash while he was visiting his sister who was dying from cancer, and he was I believe in his I think he was 40 or 42. He's very very young guy, and this is about what, 1972, 73 or so.
Sounds about right.
Um, he has been forgotten about completely, and he's a lot like um, uh, Billy Houghton. In fact, Billy Houghton actually hasn't. Uh, he's never been on any consideration list for the Hall of Fame.
Mm,
I wonder how they can do that. Um, this is where it really kind of bothers me. And
yeah.
and, Patton's been gone for such a long time that again, it's not his fault that it's I don't know who is uh, choosing the players to be on the lists for Hall of Fame consideration, but um, this is again where Gil Hodges just got in the Hall of Fame after years and years and years, um, and and Gil Hodges is a really interesting player, and how he ended up getting into the Hall of Fame after 50 years of uh, actually, passing away. And a lot of people have said with Gil Hodges that Ted Williams had something to do with it, and I'm not entirely convinced that that was true. Um, Jimmy Patton, on the other hand, he was an exceptional ball player, and he. Do you have any reason why again like he's not in the Hall of Fame or any consideration?
Yeah, I think you're right in that these guys that die at a young age, they're really hurt. And we talked a little bit earlier about how there's no one to really champion for some of these guys. And it's interesting. You talked about Gil Hodges, and if you think about it, in baseball, you have a lot more people that really kind of fight for people to get into the Hall of Fame and really
Yeah,
champion their causes, like a Gil Hodges, and even though he didn't get in, someone like Dick Allen, right? And,
yeah.
um, but they don't seem to fight for those guys in football for some reason.
I think Brendan Ryan here has a he's really on to something. A public petition should be used for some of these players. And I think that the more you talk about some of these guys, especially like on your channel and on mine, we could probably try to get some of these players in. Even if you have to write into the Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame, I think it'd be worth it, and just kind of tell the Hall of Fame, listen, like these guys, they deserve to have a shot, and it would be nice to have their names on the list for induction. Even if they're not inducted immediately, they should have their chance, and that's kind of like all what I'm asking for is for that, because there's 167 names on this list, and only 28 of them are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I've got a few names for you that I'm kind of thinking about now.
Yeah.
Billy Wilson of the San
Okay.
Francisco 49ers. He's probably on that list. Rick Caceres of the Bears. Trying to think of some more guys. Who do we have? Trying to think. Those are a couple that come to mind right off the bat. But yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think anyone can write into the Hall of Fame and give a name for consideration, where they will officially be considered, whatever that means. But
Right.
you know, yeah, it's unfortunate. Some of these guys should get a little more press than they really do.
I definitely think so. Again, it took uh, Bobby Dillon 50 years, and then he had passed away a year before he got in.
Yeah.
And then Max
They do
Speed.
that. Wait for the guy to die before, or Johnny Robinson of the Chiefs. They waited till that man could barely walk, and they finally let him in, and it's just really unfortunate, I think.
I think so too. And baseball is really famous for this, and it's too bad, because now what baseball is finding out is that they're losing living Hall of Famers, and they're not inducting Hall of Famers as they used to. Um, and I know football is a little bit better, and so I hope that things change, but again, I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm going to pull up the Hall of Very Good and kind of
Oh, okay.
rattle off some names, some of the top ones that I really like. Oh, here's one right off the bat. Gino Cappelletti.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
There's one for you. Right up your alley, right?
Yeah. Hometown guy.
Yeah. Oh, here's one. This guy's probably at the top of my list, actually. Carl Eller of the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
That guy gets such a bad rap. I mean, he has the most fumble recoveries in NFL history for a defensive player. And unfortunately, he's known for the wrong way touchdown on that fumble recovery. But it's really unfortunate, whereas he is known for that, they actually won that football game. It's not like they lost that football game. They won the football game. And I think it was on either the previous drive or the drive before that one. He created a fumble that I believe Alan Page picked up and ran back for a touchdown to help them win the game.
Wow. But that's the only thing that he's remembered for, is
Right.
that.
He also played in started the most consecutive NFL games and held that record until Brett Favre broke it.
Wow.
But he's not a Hall of Famer.
No. Wow. That's amazing. Unfortunately, I can kind of.
I'm sorry, I said Carl Eller. I meant to say Jim Marshall.
Jim, you're right. Jim Marshall.
I'm completely spacing out here. I meant to say Jim Marshall.
Let's see. Let me see. There was Congress isn't going to solve any of the Hall of Fame issues. That's for sure. It's definitely for sure.
Here's one. Dale Schaffner of the Los Angeles Rams.
He's another one. I'm actually going to get into another video at some point with some of these guys. Try to get more people involved in talking about them. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of YouTubers that are really talking about these older ball players, which I wish they would. I actually I was telling you a little bit before, but I actually went to a show this morning, and all I saw really was modern cards, and I was really taken aback. I don't know really a whole lot about modern sports cards. I'm more of a vintage guy, as you know. That's really where I like to play in. But I was very overwhelmed by a lot of the modern stuff today. And do you collect any modern cards at all?
No, basically
Oh,
no. Well, for me, modern would be like the 1990s.
okay.
I
Yeah.
do like some of the inserts from the 1990s. Just I think they have some great designs, but for the most part, I'm kind of like you. I'm just mostly vintage. So what is it that you like about vintage? Why do you collect vintage?
Oh, it's a great question. Thanks for asking. Um, so I I think it's for the history. I think it's because of the ball players
Mhm.
and the artwork, and um, it's for the chase. And I know that I haven't seen every card out there. Some of the cards that you've shown, I've never seen before. And there was a guy named Bill Forrester that you had showed on
Right.
your show, and I was like, oh my god, I have to add that to my collection. It is such a cool card. And I also
Probably didn't cost you much either, right?
no, it was probably I want to say like $10,
Yeah.
if that. And this is really crazy, Chris, because a lot of these vintage cards, these football cards, are very affordable for any collector. You just have to do a little bit of homework, and
Yeah.
you can pick up a very nice collection. Um, Bill Forrester is another guy I think who's on that list as well, and he's phenomenal. Again, he's another one of those Packers guys who hasn't gotten any love.
Here's one for you. And I know you had talked about potentially doing a video on this guy, Tank Younger of the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, and I love his rookie card.
Yeah.
And his 51 Bowman is
1950.
really great.
The 1950 Bowman rookie. Well, all those Rams cards of the 50s just are incredible. It has some of the greatest images and just the colors, and yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. It's for the Rams, it's their helmet that really
Yeah.
gets you,
Yeah. It
and
really
it's
is.
classic. It kind of pulls you in, and the uniform itself. Um, so Brandon Ryan, I think you're right here. Panini is they do have some nice stuff, although I think that a lot of collectors really get down on Panini quite a bit for all their shenanigans. But I think they do have some really nice designed cards, and they're affordable too.
Yeah, I
So
think I actually like the design of a lot of the modern stuff. It's interesting how a lot of the young people they tend to not collect vintage because they say they like to watch the players that they have a connection to those players because they're playing today. And see, I'm like you, I'm the opposite. I don't really relate to today's player.
I don't either.
I relate to the old guys and I have more of an appreciation for the history of the game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that the older ball players there were more. I hate to say this, it may sound a little snobbish, but a lot of the older ball players they had jobs. They were in your community.
Mhm.
They were very much like you and I. They didn't act like multimillionaires. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They didn't separate themselves from the community like a lot of the ball players do today. And that's one of the reasons why I have a kind of a hard time watching sports. Although I'm really happy with the turnout of the Super Bowl. I am glad about that. I like a tight game, you
Yeah.
know, and some games are just they're who's gonna win before they show up on the field. Um, so yeah, do you have a favorite set from the 1950s or 1960s?
And as far as football cards, it changes a little bit. I'm really, man, I,
That's a tough question.
I really love the 1951 Bowman football set. I like the 1952 Bowman set. Um, just great images. But I also like the 1950 Bowman because I really like the way the 1950 Bowman set is kind of a tie to history because that's when the AAFC, you had the three teams that merged with the NFL in 1950. And again, like we talked earlier, it was really the start of the NFL really starting to take hold and starting to become a popular sport as it was televised more and more. And you just had the game becoming more and more popular and things like that. But you could probably pick any of those early Bowman sets as my favorite 50, 51, or 52.
It's really tough. It's really, especially, yeah, 50, 51, 52, 1953. I could kind of leave it. I know you like the 53s because of the football, right?
I do. I'm a big fan of the big white football. Yes.
Yeah. Do you can you tell us about that big white football?
Well, so I have a theory. It's just that it's a theory. But 1953 was the first year that Dumont, and a little back history on Dumont, they were a big broadcasting company right there with ABC, CBS, and NBC,
Yeah.
and they broadcasted, they aired the Saturday night football game nationwide starting in 1953, and they would use the white football during the night football games. So I have this theory that I think that it's no accident that Bowman incorporated that white football into their card design to kind of go along with the use of the white football on Saturday night football.
I'll go along with that theory. I think it's probably correct. In fact, um, let's go into a little bit of hockey, shall we?
Okay.
Um, I've also been
I'm still learning hockey. That's not my expertise, but I love to
okay.
talk about it
Yeah.
nonetheless.
So I had a really hard time getting into vintage hockey because it was a little on the expensive side, unlike say vintage football, which is super cheap, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I had a hard time with that just because it was expensive,
Mhm.
and I didn't know who all the ball players were. And hockey seems to have its own culture,
Yes.
and yeah, unlike any other sport, I think. Um, and you have a favorite set, right?
Well, so I'm working on the 54-55 Parkhurst set, but that's not my favorite set. My
Wh-
favorite set is actually a set that I do not own a card from yet.
Really?
Yeah, and that is the 54 Tops. I love the design of the set. And it was actually when I was thinking about doing a hockey set, I wanted to do a set that I didn't have any cards from. And yeah,
That's right there, right?
that's that right there. I've been
Wow.
looking at some too, and I have a couple on my watch list right now. But it really came down to, well, there are a few sets. It was the 64 Tops, the tall boy set, um, the 54 Tops, and the 54 Parkhurst were kind of my last three. And if not for the fact with the 54 Tops, they only had the American teams. And I wanted to do a set where I could get also the Canadian players as well, the Canadian teams. And if Tops had both American and Canadian teams, I probably would have definitely gone for that one.
Yeah, I've actually. So you've kind of shown off some 53 Parkhurst. right? And some 54.
Some 54, yeah.
54. So both the 53 and the 50, I don't have any 53 here, but the 54, I do have one right here, and actually, it is obviously it's the 54, the All Star here, but um, I've learned a lot from you on this particular set, and the 53s I think are really gorgeous,
They really are.
and they're fairly affordable for the most part. Obviously, you got your Rocket Richard,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that one's not too affordable, but
yeah,
there are some affordable ones in there.
and I had actually found that this card right here, Gordie Howe,
But yeah,
and that's a very affordable Gordie Howe card for the time.
considering, yeah. It's really interesting. You talked about hockey being expensive, and I think a lot of that is that they just had lower production numbers was a big reason for that. And of course, Parkhurst was mostly distributed in Canada for the most part. I think maybe a few other states, like in Michigan, maybe, and like maybe some of those border states. But not only the thing about hockey, if you're really patient, you can find some good deals. And it's, one day the card will sell for this, and then the next day it'll sell for this. They're kind of all over the place. But if you exercise some patience, you can find some good deals.
Yeah, it is very tough to be patient. So, but it pays off. It really can. Depends on the card too, and depends on the situation and the timing. And timing in life is everything. But yeah, you're right. If you look around and do your research and your homework on a particular card, and you're patient, it will reward you, right? Another card in the 54 set is the Boom Boom Jeffrey, which I think is absolutely gorgeous.
I think he's an underrated player, personally.
He is. There's I think 2017 they came out with the 100 greatest hockey players of all time. He's on that list, and a lot of those guys on that list are very affordable,
Yeah.
honestly, which really surprised me. You have a lot of Hall of Famers in that 53 and 54 set, that, and some of them are not found in any other set either. Um, and it's I think if you were going to collect vintage hockey, those would be the sets that you might want to start out with. What do you think?
Yeah, those are great sets. Parkhurst is a very, very historical company, really, as far as hockey cards go. I don't think people talk about that enough, in my opinion. But one of the hockey sets that I'm really kind of been eyeballing lately is the last Parkhurst set that they did. And what was it, 63, 64, I think is the one. I just picked up a Gordie Howe for $85.
Wow.
I mean, I was thrilled with that. It's like $85 for Gordie Howe, and it's from the last Parkhurst year, and that's just a great set because in the background, for they only have three teams. They have the Red Wings, the Maple Leafs, and the Canadiens. And for the Red Wings, they have the American flag in the background, and for the Maple Leafs, they have the old Canadian flag in the background. And so this is a little tie to history. The following year, Canada changed their national flag. So that was the last year that they even had that flag, but it's on those Parkhurst cards for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Wow. That's I mean it's a great set. It's I think it's classic that the last year. Some years are a little hard to kind of figure out what they are. From like 1960 through like 61, 62. And then even with tops too, the tops hockey. I get a little confused on some of this stuff. There is actually a really nice late '50s Parkhurst design. It's the
Yeah.
58 right here, and even in the mid 1950s Parkhurst 57 and 55, they look a lot alike. And there's really nothing on the back of these to suggest what they are.
Mhm.
So if you're a rookie collector, you might need to do a little bit of homework and a little bit of research on this stuff. Um, Let me see. There is. Oh,
Jeffrey. That's my buddy Jeffrey.
hey, Jeffrey. Yeah, he's right. He's right. And then, well, I think we can help you out with that, Brendan. So there's another design too that you might be familiar with, and it's this one right here, the
Oh yeah.
1960. This is a great design.
Oh, I love that design. I know the card you're looking for that set too.
Yeah, I almost pulled the trigger last week, in fact, and unfortunately, there was a couple of things wrong with it, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I showed you and you pointed these things out, and this is one of the reasons why if you are not sure about a card, that a second pair of eyes is and a second opinion is something that we all kind of need in the hobby, and wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, none of us know it all, right?
Mm-mm.
We have to depend on each other for information, and just like you said, sometimes a second pair of eyes, because there's just things we might miss, or you know we it's always good to have a second opinion.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you don't know about the card, um or if you think that the purchase may not be a good one, or if you're having any kind of doubt, just walk away or get a second opinion, because that will save you a lot. There's nothing worse than having a pit in the bottom of your stomach over, and you know what this feeling is because we've all had it.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh my God, I paid too much for this card, or I shouldn't have bought this card,
Or
but
it's not exactly what you're looking for as far as eye appeal, or
yeah,
and it doesn't always have to be the best looking card, but there are certain things we all kind of look for in cards, and kind of the overall eye appeal of what we're looking for. I mean, I don't mind a crease here and there, as long as I get it for the creased price. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Chris, you got a shout out here.
Oh yeah, Brian. Hey Brian. Brian's a great guy. He's got a great channel. Mostly shows football cards from his childhood, kind of
Oh, nice.
late '80s, early '90s, and I literally learn something every single time I watch his videos. Every single time.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to watch a few, and then let's see, Bill Forrester. Do you know Ron Kramer? Have you heard that name?
Yeah, Ron Kramer was a really good player for the Packers as well. If you look at his 1958 Topps rookie card, man, that is one of the best looking cards I have ever seen. It's just a beautiful looking card. Um, just he's got his old Michigan football helmet on, and he's standing in front of the stadium, and it's a fantastic looking card.
I'll have to look for it. I'm a huge fan of the 1959 Topps football, and I I don't think I have the patience to complete a set. I'm still working on the 1955 Bowman and the 56, in fact, just because I love that set, and I know you're pretty close to completing the 56, right?
56 is complete.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, so I have 56 complete. I have the 55 top set complete. I have 55 Bowman complete. I'm closing in on 59 tops actually, and
Oh,
it's kind of one of those. A lot of times I don't, other than the early Bowman football sets, I don't usually set out to complete sets. But as I pick up more and more cards that I like, all of a sudden I was picking up 59 cards, and I've been collecting for a long time, but I pick up a 59 here and there, and one day I just decided, let me count and see what I have. And I was like, oh my gosh, I only need like 60 cards or something. So it's like,
well,
let's just go ahead and knock it out.
what I like about your channel is that you have a spotlight of a small grouping of cards, and you talk about these players, and a lot of these players I've never heard about before, and a lot of their stories are really not told anywhere else, I think. Um, and so I mean, I've seen a lot of your cards, and I'm like, oh man, that is so cool. Like I like that Bell Forrester card. I had to grab it, and then I wanted to learn more about the players themselves, and I think that's really kind of key to how you can build a nice collection. But somebody's got to show you first, right? On like what is out there. And I've been in the hobby for, oh god, probably since '94 for vintage, and then prior to that since 1984. I
Mhm.
haven't seen everything, and it's a lifelong thing for me, and I probably never will see every single card out there. I don't think anybody will.
Yeah.
Um,
But now
but
you remember what it was like back in the day, though, before eBay and the internet. I mean,
mhm.
there were lots of cards you didn't see until you actually saw them in person.
And you had to go to a card shop.
Yeah. Yeah. You had to find them, and I mean, it was great because you would see cards for the first time, and it was just amazing. And you're probably a lot like me. The reason I kind of do my channel the way I do, where I talk about these players, is because I never grew out of the reading the backs of the cards when I was a kid. I used to love reading the backs of the cards, learning about the players, learning about past players, and things like that.
Right.
Just I never grew out of that. I still love doing that, digging in to find out who these guys were.
Yeah, it's fun. It's addictive too. I found that vintage basketball is very addictive, especially from the 1970s
That's a great
and
one.
70. Do you have any favorite vintage basketball?
As far as a set,
Yeah, like tops or
so I really like the oversized 1977 cards, the really big ones. I like those. I know some people don't like them because of the size, but I think it's got some great images. I really like the 71 set and the 72 set from Tops. Those are some of my favorites. 61 Fleer is a fantastic, just beautiful set.
yeah. Do you have any favorite players?
Um, as far as overall from
Yeah,
any of those, well, so I grew up a big Dr. J fan, so I'm
me
definitely
too.
a fan of his. I was a Lakers fan, as you know, unfortunately, during the '80s. So I liked Kareem Abdul-Jabbar during that time, and um, I like Jerry West, even though I never saw Jerry West play. I'm a big Jerry West fan. You and I were talking just a few days ago about Bob Pettit and how he gets no recognition.
None, none.
And
He's such an amazing player.
yeah,
It's really interesting. There's a a giant, I guess, spot missing in basketball history, and it largely, I think, due to the lack of sports cards in the 1950s and 1960s, and even in the early 80s too. I
this
think
wasn't a popular sport during that time. I mean, it didn't have
that,
the same popularity, and There's very few, especially when you go back. I think there are very few of those early basketball cards really out there. I don't think people realize, and it's not like they're super rare or anything, but
Right.
I mean, uh, especially like the 48 Bowman and the 1957 Tops. They're out there, but they're not out there like the baseball cards of 1957.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know Bill Leonard? Is that
Bill,
a yeah? Is that a Brandon? Is that a football player? Just curious. Bill Leonard Bowman rookie. I'm curious about
Bill
that.
Leonard. Yeah, I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah. Um, I I'm trying to dig up a theory on the 19, especially the 1950 Bowman football. Some of those cards seem to be really really difficult. Yep, he says football. I'm not
Who did
familiar
he
with.
play for? Did he play for the 49ers?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too because I'm not familiar with him.
Or, yeah, I'm not familiar with Bill
Yeah,
Leonard.
Brandon, let us know, will you? Um, I seem to think that some of those 1950 Bowmans are short printed, although they're not saying that they're short printed. That's because there's some very difficult cards in that set. Guys that you would never think of too, you know.
Yeah, I would think because of the card numbers, there probably are no short prints because there's 144 cards in the set, and they printed them 36 to a sheet. So I would assume that there were four sheets. But I agree with you. There are some cards that just don't seem to come up for sale quite as often, and when they do, they go for more money than you would think, even though they're quote unquote a common player.
Yeah, Ted Fritsch is one guy.
Yeah,
And there's, obviously we know about the 1948 Bowmans. They have been long known short prints in that set. Um, and it's one of the challenges of of the 48 Bowman football set. Uh, I kind of forget though, like exactly how it's divisible by.
yeah.
Even
So
though
the
they
ones
do.
divisible by three are the short prints, and then the ones that start with two and go by three. So in other words, 2, 5, 8, and 11 are the next hardest, and then the ones starting with one, going 1, 4, 7, and 10, those are the easiest.
Okay.
So
Do you
you
know?
actually have two levels. Well, you have three levels. You have the easiest, then the next level is a little bit tougher, and then the actual short prints are the monsters.
Okay, do you know why they did that?
I have no idea.
How about the 52 Bowman? Do you know why they
Yeah, I
went
mean,
for it?
well, again, this is my theory, and I did a video on this, but I think it's because of the presses that they would cut the cards on were the wrong size, and they had them sized for the smaller cards. And when they put these big sheets on there, they didn't fit. So they had to cut off the end, either the far left or the far right. They had to cut those off, and it created short prints.
That sounds reasonable, to tell you the truth. I because I can't see them doing a Gaudi type thing, right? Where
Right.
they intentionally leave out certain cards for
Yeah.
collectors to
Yeah,
to
I
say,
definitely
"We're gonna
don't
take."
think they did that. And the interesting thing about those Bowman cards, because we've seen uncut sheets, um, the one side is always, it's almost always those cards are off center in one direction, and then the other side are always off centered in the other direction, which leads you to believe that they just did not fit on the things, and they cut those off. And then, so they would cut the right side off when they ran the sheet through. They'd run some of those through, and then they would flip and they would start cutting the left side off. That's my theory, anyway.
I'll go with that too. I think that's very reasonable. Um, I just, it kind of leads me to think that they were very quick to print out that large series because Topps had printed it and printed out their cards and as larger cards. would that make the small more difficult, do you think?
I
Because
think they
they
are. Other than the short prints in the 52 large, but I actually think there are less of the 52 Bowman small out there than the large, other than, like I said, the short prints. Some of those short prints are really tough to find.
Yeah, yeah. You don't really see, especially the Frank Gifford in that set, and the Charlie Connolly and the
Charlie
Choo Choo
Connolly,
Justice.
Choo Choo Justice. Oh my gosh, that
Yeah,
is one of my favorite cards. I'll throw that out there. I'm still looking for it.
I'm helping you on that too because
I'm still looking for that one.
it is a beautiful card, and the artwork is fantastic, and this happens to be one of my favorite
Oh yeah, Bobby
cards
Lane.
in the set. Just the colors alone is, and no pressure or anything, guys, but hey, you know what? Right here, if any card you would want for your collection, I think Bobby Lane would be
People don't talk about that guy enough.
no, not at all, not at all. He was an amazing player. Um, do you uh do you have any thoughts on the curse of Bobby Lane?
It seems to be working, right? I mean,
I
it
think
seems to be working.
I
Uh,
I think
wow.
so too.
Except
So,
I
some
think he only said for 50 years, right? It's gone on longer than that.
Yeah, yeah, it has. Another one of my favorites is right here, and
Oh yeah,
I don't really see this card often.
I need
Um,
that one actually. I need that.
I'll I'll look around. If I see one, I'll show you a good copy. Maybe this. I thought that this was going to be a very expensive card. In fact, because of who it is.
Yeah.
And some of these cards, at least when I was collecting when I was a teenager, um, the first can you remember the first Bowman you picked up?
No, not football. The only thing. So I know you said you started in '84, and then you got into vintage in '94. I was the complete opposite. I bought my first packs in 1980, took some of them to school with me, and had a kid in my class who said, "Oh, my dad collected football cards." And this kid brought me their dad's collection of football cards. And they were a little bit of a few 1955 Bowman, and then 1956 Topps football cards, and then a few 1957 Topps baseball. And I was instantly hooked. I mean, this kid gave me these cards. I took them home that day. I'm sitting on the living room floor, just kind of reading the backs. I'm like, Elroy Crazy Legs Hurst, this guy was the man. And so I instantly got hooked. And then it was just like, just a few months after that, I was at the local flea market with my dad and found my first baseball card dealer. And I had never seen these baseball cards before. I saw Mickey Mantles and Hank Aaron's and Willie Mays and guys like that. And the first vintage card I bought a 1959 Topps Yogi Berra because that was my mom's favorite player. And took it home, showed it to my mom, and I mean, she was more excited than I was, and I was hooked. And then went back the next week and bought a 1965 Topps Hank Aaron.
Wow.
And then you're probably familiar with this. It was just like maybe a few months after that. Yeah, maybe just a few months or a couple months, maybe a month even after that, where this
Oh
came.
yeah. Yeah, that was a great magazine too.
Yeah, and that's when I really first learned, and that with the flea market. You mean these cards are valuable? I had no idea. I was completely clueless with that. And but yeah, so I just fell in love with vintage cards right from the very beginning.
I um I can remember my first Bowman card that I picked up, and I was 17 years old, and it was a 1950 Bowman Leo Nomolini.
Yeah.
I picked it up for $15 at an auction, and I couldn't believe it. First off, I saw this card, and I was like looking around the room, and I was like, "Oh my god, I hope nobody else picks
Nobody
up."
bids. Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, I felt like I just won the lottery. Um, and you know, as a 17-year-old collecting vintage football or any kind of vintage card, you don't really see that too often these days. So I want to kind of get your take on sports card history or hobby history.
Okay.
Um,
That's another
do
one of
you,
my favorite subjects.
mine too, because nobody really talks about it. Do you have any thoughts on the importance of learning hobby history?
I think it's absolutely important. I mean, I think just in general, history is important, right? And whereas history doesn't always repeat itself, it does frequently. And it's just good to know where this hobby started from and the early pioneers that really built it. I mean, without some of these guys like Jefferson Burdick and Charles Bray and John D. Wagner and Preston Oram, and I mean, guys like that, I mean, we wouldn't even have this hobby really. It probably would be nothing like it is today.
Right. I agree with you. Um, I don't know too many people who actually know those names, and some people will say who. And what I think was kind of concerning to me too was that some of the card collectors uh, that I had run into didn't even know who Jackie Robinson was,
Mm.
and that was really kind of concerning because again, if you don't know your history or the ball players, um, how I mean, you're not going to get into vintage. And I heard this too from a few collectors. One today, in fact, that he didn't know how to get into vintage. And do you would you have any advice for anybody who wants to get into vintage, especially like football, maybe?
I think if you're really interested in getting into vintage, you have to have a love for history. You have to really like. I mean, don't do it because you think they're going to be valuable 50 years from now or whatever. I mean, you can do that, but that's not the joy, right? The joy is the history to me. And if you have a love for history, I think you will really love vintage cards, um, because it's just chock full of history. I mean, and you've seen my channel. I mean, I can take a regular
Yeah.
player and somehow find something interesting about this person. And and there are a lot of guys that, you got guys like Marion Motley, who was breaking the color barrier for football, and he's never talked about. Never,
Yeah.
never talked about. But he has a huge place in the history of football. And guys like Otto Graham, who played for the Browns. Also, you showed a Bobby Lane card a little bit ago. Um, yeah, I think if you really have an interest in vintage, it needs to be. I mean, it shouldn't be about the money, really. Let me get into vintage because I think it's a good investment. But I think if you love the history and learning about the players, that's where I really think you would enjoy it. And to me, it's easy to get into it because you just start reading about these guys, and you say,
Yeah.
like with Bill Forrester, you see this guy and you find him interesting and you go buy a card of him.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for post-war football, there's nobody more important than this guy right
Yeah,
here.
George Hallis. I mean, just
Yeah.
Papa
And
Bear.
yeah.
He almost practically started the NFL, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A very important person. And this is an amazing card, to tell you the truth. I didn't pay a whole lot for this. In fact,
It'll
most
cost
of
you
my
more today.
oh, okay.
It'll definitely cost you more
I
today, but yeah.
I I haven't paid. I have to admit, I haven't paid too much attention to the prices of a lot of the vintage, early vintage football, say like 1950, 51, 52 Bowman. So
I'm actually looking for an upgrade on mine. I have a pretty nice one, but it's got a 2, I think it is, written on the front. And I'll admit it bothers me a little bit, but not enough to where I'm ready to go out and pay the current price. It may just end up staying in my collection like that, but it's all good.
I was telling you not too long ago that the 52 Bowman Billy Houghton was one of the most expensive cards, non Hall of Fame cards that I purchased, and I think I think people kind of understand that he is somebody who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame and is not. Um, do you have any players in your collection that you kind of paid quite a bit for, although they're not in the Hall of Fame?
Ted Fritsch. Ted Fritsch is one of them. Tobin Rote is. I got a really good deal on a 51 Bowman Tobin Rote a few weeks ago or a month ago. But other than that, I'm having a really hard time. It was one of those guys I haven't really pursued until the last maybe a couple of years. And his cards they're not cheap. They're just not cheap.
Yeah.
Charlie Connerly is another one. His cards are not cheap anymore.
These cards used to be really cheap when I first got into it. I'm sure when you first got into it too, they were dime a dozen, and I am now kind of shifting because I have all of the, well, not all, but a lot of the 50, 51, 52 Bowmans for football, and so now I'm kind of focusing on late 50s and very early 60s, and it's it's kind of shocking to me when I actually do see the prices of some of these cards. And I kind of wonder, like, if I had to start my collection over again, I don't think I could do it.
It's tough getting started now in vintage cards because they're pricey. I mean, they and football is cheap compared to baseball,
Right.
but a lot of the cards are still kind of pricey. I mean,
yeah.
you know the one that's like getting me right now that I just can't seem to nail down from the 1948 Bowman set, and it's killing me.
We're not going to say what it is.
We're not going to talk about him tonight.
Absolutely not. But
he's killing me.
Yeah, no, it's it's something.
He's not in the Hall of Fame there. I mean, but yeah, he's
he should be. He should be. The one that I really love too is this one right here, Frank Gifford. And I think the funny thing is with Frank Gifford is that he is a multi-generational player, and him and say Yogi Berra and Phil Rizzuto as well, because those guys really they transitioned from generation to generation. So
a lot of people, if you didn't see him play, which you and I didn't, he was on Monday Night Football. So a lot of people remember him from Monday Night Football, and he had a huge part to play in the growth of the NFL. Being in New York during that time period, the Giants really started becoming really popular in the mid 50s. And then kind of culminating and winning the NFL championship in 1956. And he was a huge part of that.
Yeah. I think their quarterback had a lot to do with that too.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting thing with the Giants in 1946, their championship. I'm still writing about that, but I wonder if you know anything about that. They tried to bribe the players of the 46 Giants, and I found a couple of really great photos. In fact,
you sent those to me. You showed them to me. Yeah, that's a fascinating story. It really is.
It is, and about the same time too, you had a couple of I think Boston Bruins players who were bribed as well. There was a gambling ring in the NHL in the 1940s.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, it's so there was two incidences. Once, I believe, in about 1936 or 37, and then again in the mid 1940s. Um, and there was at least two Bruins players who were banned from the league. And then in 1946, you had the NFL players on the Giants, two of them who were banned as well, and one got to continue. He played in 1950, and he doesn't. I don't think he has a card, but I'm not quite sure. But I wonder if that actually happened more frequently, and it was just kind of like hush hush because
I think it happened a lot. I mean, people talk about all the gambling that was going on in baseball games, and there are instances that we know about for sure. Yeah, I have to believe there were these same issues going on in the other sports as well.
yeah. Here's in something interesting. Sammy Baugh,
Yeah,
one of my favorite players. Obviously, I never saw him play, but um, do you have any favorite Sammy Baugh cards?
I like that 52 Bowman you showed earlier. That's one of my favorites. So for me, it comes down to either 52 Bowman or the 1950 Bowman are my favorites.
Oh, okay, okay. The 50 is really nice. A lot of people say that his 48 Bowman is his rookie, but he's
Yeah.
got a 1938 Dixieland Premium,
Yep.
and he's got some matchbook as well, matchbook covers. Um, I I I wonder why people kind of still continue to consider some of those 40, especially the 48 Bowman, to be like his rookie, because
Money,
they do money.
money.
Yeah, I agree.
Not many people have the Dixie lid premium card because so they call the 48 Bowman, which was easier to get, I guess, at the time. Um, his rookie card. I'm not a big fan of designating cards as rookie cards myself, personally. I wish cards could just kind of stand on their own as far as it's a 1948 Bowman Sammy Baugh card. I know I'm in the minority with that, but I hope for a day when people look at just the card more than it's a rookie card.
Be- Beckett really started that.
Yeah.
They started that, and I think because for subscriptions and again money. There was something really interesting here that I wanted to ask you about. Bob St. Clair punched Hallis and knocked him down. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. I'm not familiar with that story. He has a great channel too, by the way. I watch a lot of his videos. I don't always comment on them, but he shows old programs. I believe that were his dad's and his dad's collection,
Yeah,
and it's a great channel.
yeah. I just got introduced actually, not too long ago. There's another. Oh, here's something really cool.
Bob
Curly
St. Clair
Lambeau.
was a big dude and quite. I think he's the guy that ate the raw meat, right? Bob St. Clair.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, he
Oh,
used to eat raw meat.
that's that. Oh no, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No
I
way.
think that's who it was.
Um, Billy Houghton, first receiver with 500 catches.
I think actually when Houghton retired, he held a lot of the receiving records. Actually,
Wow. Is there any reason why Houghton's not in?
he played for the Packers.
Other
Probably.
okay. I mean, other than that, because we I think we both kind of established that those Packers
Yeah,
teams were horrible.
yeah.
Um, it,
He never played for a winner that I'm aware of. I think he may have ended his career with the Cleveland Browns in 1960. I think just 1 year,
yeah,
but
Del Schaffner too. He, I mean, he kind of got shopped around quite a bit too.
yeah.
And then there was Pete. what's his name?
Retzlaff.
Yeah, Pete Retzlaff, who's another one of my favorites.
His 1959 Tops is a great looking card.
Oh, it is. It really is. It's one of my favorites. I wrote a fairly lengthy article on that set. Unfortunately, I kind of forgot to add Jim Brown to that. But Jim Brown, his 1959 Tops is I think it's better looking than his rookie.
I agree.
And it's also a heck of a lot cheaper too. Um, there's such a disparity between rookie cards, the price of rookie cards, and like the second year. And some rookie cards are just they're not good looking.
I like the image as far as the pose, but as you know, that card has a lot of condition issues. I mean, it's the registration is usually off, the centering is usually off. You usually have some sort of snow in the black around the card, and it just has all kinds of issues. So it's really hard, especially for the common collector, to find a copy that looks nice.
Yeah, yeah. There are certain specific cards that are really difficult to come across, and they could be nobody players, like we were talking about before. Um, one of the players that I've always really for hockey at least that I've always had kind of a difficulty with is this gentleman right here, Glenn Hall.
Oh yeah.
And obviously I want his rookie card, but it's kind of at a funny angle, and I picked up his second year. But Glenn Hall is, he's one of the best goalies of all time, and I love goalies.
Yeah, goalie cards are great.
Do you have a favorite goalie? Or
Glenn Hall is up there for sure. Jacques Plante, I really like of the Canadians. I'm a big Terry Sawchuk fan. So those are probably my three favorite, I would say.
Okay.
You're up there.
Yeah. I have a favorite too. I got a few favorites, in fact, because I specifically go after goalies. One I'm not going to discuss because I'm trying to land it. But and there's a couple of football players that have really great images. It seems like on every card they have, and that happens to be this gentleman right here.
Well, there's one I'm not real crazy about. His 1973 Tops is not the greatest looking card, but all of his cards with the Chargers, man, you're right. His 67 is beautiful. His 68 is great. His 69 is great. Those are great looking cards.
Yeah. The 69 Tops football set is really kind of growing on me because of the simplicity of the design. And basically another football card that I really love, and a player that I really love is Joe Namath. And I've spoken about him quite extensively. Do you have any favorite cards or players that just look great on a card and you go after specifically?
Elroy Hirsch. I think all of his cards look great. I mean, they all look fantastic. Tobin Rote. I mean, all of his cards are fantastic, in my opinion. They just all look great. I'm trying to think of some other. Tom Fears of the Rams, those early Bowman cards.
Very underrated ball player.
As the person talked about earlier, Sammy Baugh. I love all of his cards. I think they're just fantastic. The only card I don't have that I would like to have is his 48 Leaf.
Sammy Baugh.
Yeah. I have the 48 Bowman. I wouldn't mind having the Dixie Lid Premium, but it's gotten pricey lately, and I'm not willing to pay that price for it.
Yeah, I've attempted to complete both of those sets. I'm only missing, I think, two premiums, uh, they can be quite pricey. And I think the other thing too is storage for especially with the 1965 tops, the tall boys,
Yeah.
and even the late 60s basketball. I think that's where people have the biggest problem with those cards. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but that could be the reason why they're not, well, for the most part,
Fully collected.
the expense, the expense. Um,
So I have a 1965 Topps football story. I actually completed the set several years ago, and because I loved it, I loved the way it looked. But I hated storing it. I hated it. It was so awkward. I had some cards that were graded and some that weren't, and it was just really awkward for storage. And I ultimately said, you know what, I'm just going to sell it and buy something else. And I regret doing that because it's funny because now I find myself picking up 1965 Topps football cards again. And but yeah, the storage is an issue. I told you 1965 top or 1964 hockey. I was contemplating doing that set. And ultimately, I said I was going to do that set along with the 54 Parkhurst. And more, I started looking at the prices, and I said, "Nah, I'm not
yeah.
going down that road." I've picked up some that I like, but I'm not going to try for the set.
It's set for me. Set. I am very too impatient for set building these days. Because first off, I want it all, and it's very, you know how it is. It's
Yeah.
very very hard to, we live in like a push button age, and I think that can translate over to sports cards as well. And for me, I kind of fell into a vintage basketball addiction because again, like these things were so cheap that I wasn't paying attention to the prices. I was paying, and even for like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I think I paid like maybe under 50 or maybe a little over $50 for it. And same with the 72 Kareem
That stuff
Abdul-Jabbar.
just 10 years ago was not very expensive. Just 10 years ago, it was not very expensive.
Yeah, these cards. Do you have any thoughts on why, again, like why vintage basketball and especially with vintage football, like why these these cards they're not expensive?
It's interesting. When I first started collecting cards in 1980, everybody said, don't collect football. Nobody cares about football cards. It's baseball is king. And people still say that. And, I get it. Baseball has this rich history. Um, but I just don't understand why I feel like they're almost conditioned not to appreciate these other sports. But these other sports have great history as well. And you and I have talked about this, and I know some other people have talked about this. To me, the most absolute beautiful cards as far as design are probably your vintage hockey cards. I think those are some of the most beautiful design cards. And
I
then
agree.
right after that, the early Bowman football cards are just great. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to collect those.
I agree. There was so I collect a few modern cards, and then this is I think it's the 2002 upper the Gridiron Kings,
Yeah.
Don West.
Mhm.
But and I do it for the artwork.
Yeah.
And so the only thing is there's something still missing that you're not getting it. Unlike say the Bowmans here.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time tracking this card down. Um, this was years in the making, and it's a gorgeous card.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ernie Stoutner, and again,
I
it's
just
got
picked mine up like 3 weeks ago, maybe or 4 weeks ago. I think I told you about it. I was telling
Yeah.
somebody about it. I've told a few people about it. I wanted the card. Obviously, I need it for my set. I just didn't want to pay some of the prices that they were going for, and I was just kept being patient, waited. Saw some of them go for $50 and $60, and even nicer condition ones for $80, $100, and I didn't want to pay that. I think I ended up getting mine for around $18, maybe 20, something like that. I forget now, but it was just a case of just be patient. You'll find
Yeah.
one that looks good enough to where you'll be happy with it.
Yeah. There was, and the funny thing is, like, when I collect these cards, I'm obviously I'm doing it. I've never seen any of these players play. So, which is really funny because I've never seen any of the other
Older
guys I
guy,
collect, the vintage guys,
yeah.
but I've never there was a huge chunk of my collecting, history, if you will, between, like, 1994 and quite recently, where I never saw any of these current ball players. Joe Burrow, I've never seen him play, or some of these recent, football players, but I collect their cards, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
definitely unusual. Um, I don't watch nearly the same amount of sports as I used to. It's again, I don't know. I enjoy the history more than I do modern sports these days.
I do too. I do too. I'm definitely, one of the kind of people that are collectors that collects for the history and for the art especially. And there's a really interesting, where was it here? Brandon Ryan, have you ever heard of any original print plates surface of the early Bowmans?
I'll let you take that, but that's a good question. Not necessarily the plates, but there are some things out there, right?
There are. So this is really it's a great question. There is original artwork, uh, but I don't think we've seen all the artwork. Obviously, um, you're definitely not seeing artwork for this particular card, or the YA tittle here, right? There's some artwork that I think we've come across that they never issued for the players, um, and there was a time where, Bowman, when they transitioned, they changed their name, from Gum Inc. to Bowman in 1944, and then again in 1947. They switched the printing, and I think it was Zabel Brothers, and then, I want to say Lord Baltimore as well, uh, but, it's something that I don't think we're ever going to find all the artwork for, even if it exists. Do you have any thoughts
Yeah,
on
you know,
any of this?
we've seen some of the proofs and things like that, and which are interesting. And I mean, you never know what's going to be uncovered, but unfortunately, I think some of this stuff is probably lost to time.
Yeah.
I man, I might have to sell a kidney if original artwork of say 52 Bowman came up for sale.
Yeah, some of that stuff probably would be even for football. I mean, I know there's some for baseball. Some of the stuff, uh, I'm not sure if it would sell actually. Um, you and I would buy it, but,
I would
um
hope nobody else would be interested in it. I would love to clean up on some of that.
yeah, the original artwork, for a lot of these sets is just gone. We've never found any, original artwork for the T206 or T205 or the T207s. There's a little bit of, original artwork from the 1934 Diamond Stars,
Yeah.
and that's only because they found it in a box from the original, I guess the original owner or the person who printed the cards,
Yeah.
and I want to say that was Charles Steinbacher, um, and then
And
uh,
you're talking about the ones that were actually never released, right?
yeah,
But
yeah. So
yeah.
there's one guy. I think you may have showed me a copy of a player from 1951 that he had retired or something, or he I want to say was it Rebel Roy Steiner, or there's another guy with a very long name from 51 or 52, where he got traded, I think, so he wasn't on the team uh, that he was on in 1951, I think,
Mhm.
and so or 50, and he's got a 1951 piece of artwork that he never
Hmm.
they just didn't they didn't print. It's a really neat looking card, and I wish I could remember the guy's name.
Yeah, I'm not
Uh,
familiar with that.
yeah, there's another. Let me see, 55 Bowman. Do you have any favorite 55 Bowmans?
Yeah, a lot of those. I like the Bobby Lane with kind of the purple background, and the purple background with the blue uniform is really cool. Trying to think some of the other ones. Breezy Reed of
Oh yeah.
the Green Bay Packers. I mean, not a big name. Well, was a pretty good football player and a good coach too. Um, Played for the Packers, and just the uniform looks fantastic. I mean, it pops on the card. Uh, Ben Agajanian,
I was just thinking of him actually.
just an
Um,
incredible story, just a great
y-
story.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when he was young, I think he was in college actually, or maybe high school. I can't remember when it happened, but he was in an accident where he ended up losing all of his toes on his kicking foot, and but was a great kicker and had a very long career, and just a fantastic kicker, and nobody talks about him. And I personally believe he should be in the Hall of Fame, but I mean, people know about Tom Dempsey. They don't know about Ben Agajanian.
Yeah.
Had a very long career and actually played for free for the Raiders in the AFL.
Oh wow.
Didn't charge them anything. He ended up being a very successful business person, and ended up playing for the Raiders for free for 1 year, which they would never allow that now. I mean, but
Um, do you with vintage football? How do you think that it would be if it was more popular? Like, why wouldn't it? How come it's not? You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't seem to be very popular for some reason. And I'm wondering why cards from the 1950s and 60s, because they're really very cheap. Um,
I think it's lack of stats. They didn't start officially tracking quarterback sacks until 1982. So we don't hear about some of those great, defensive players that sack the quarterback a lot. A little sneak preview. I'm doing this 1956 Topps set spotlight where I go through the whole set and show every card of the set. In my next video for that particular series, I'm going to talk about a guy named Norm Willie who played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He actually had a game. I forget what year it was. He had a game where they went back and looked at the game records. He had 17 sacks in a game.
wow.
17 sacks in one game.
Wow.
Nobody,
That's
nobody talks about that guy. And that's a really cool card too. It's the one where he's kind of got his arms out and he looks like an eagle kind of flying in, and it's a cool card. I'm sure you probably get it for $5 on eBay.
There's a lot of really great cards from the 1950s and 1960s out there that are really cheap, and I think if you really wanted to uh, get into vintage football, you can look around and again do your homework on this stuff, as you should always. And when I was at that show this morning, I was completely lost, and there was I didn't know what was anything. I I'm not gonna say I felt foolish, but it was close to it. I felt kind of stupid. And it was because again, I don't pay attention to regular sports these days like I don't know, probably should. I'm more interested in the vintage guys, but there's so many cards out there that I think it gets ridiculous where the companies they oversaturate cards. Now, when we were kids growing up, we didn't have this problem because you had one card or maybe two cards of a player every year.
Yeah.
And I don't know how modern collectors do it today. I'm not putting them down. I tell people to collect what you want, collect what you
Absolutely.
like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the um, the card companies they just have a new spin on uh, the junk wax era, and I saw
Except
um,
except the cards cost like 20 times more than they did in the junk wax era.
yeah, and for what the cards go for today, you could have a very nice vintage football collection. And I saw one player, I think it was Joe Burrow, and it was the same exact card but with different colors. And
Yeah.
I think that ruins a lot of um, collectors wanting to continue with the hobby because usually when somebody gets burned, they don't want to come back. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah, sure. What I would like to see the current card companies do is be a little more innovative and kind of do something different. I don't know. Me personally, I don't want the same card, but with just different colors on it. And I think they are trying to appeal to the people that are just looking for the quick hit and kind of just to make money off of it. And
Right.
I don't think that's really good for the long term health of the hobby. I mean, as you know, I mean, going back to decades and decades, there have been people that were in the hobby for money, right? And I'm not knocking that. That
Right.
people are free to do whatever they want to do and collect how you want to collect, hobby how you want to hobby, and stuff like that. But I think if you want to have long term health in the hobby, there's a reason they call it collecting, right? You're
Yeah.
collecting. You are gathering cards that you want to own and collect them and build a collection. And I would like to see somehow them be a little more innovative with some new ideas that really make people want to collect.
I agree, and the other thing that I saw was that there was a lot of autographed cards, and autographs used to be something that they were kind of rare, right? So when we were growing up, people would say, don't get your card autographed," and now everybody
Mess
wants
up
it,
the value of them, right?
right? But what I think what's also done is it's deteriorated the specialty of the autograph, and it's 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 something that I think that it's really kind of bothered me more and more as I looked at it, and um, that you can for what they're charging people today, new collectors of these modern cards. Um, you have older ball players who are signing autographs on these cards. Um, you could build a really nice vintage collection. You could get the a vintage card of that player that is either having his autograph on that particular card, or like a rainbow, right?
Right.
So it's, I mean, it
So
does.
let me ask you a question about autographs and where you think the autograph hobby is going. But one of the things there are two things that I hate about modern day autographs. One, the card companies use the stickers mostly these days and not actual on card autographs. But two, nobody knows how to sign their name anymore. I call
Right.
it the two lines in a scribble, right?
Yeah.
Two lines in a squiggly. I mean, it's really frustrating, and you see people that get all excited about pulling these autographs that literally the guy has drawn two lines, and I just don't get it. I don't.
Yeah. So I did a kind of a lengthy article about this. Um, and a lot of the older players kind of took some of the younger guys aside and yanked them over and said, "Hey, listen, like you got to clean up your act. You got to make your autograph legible, because again, if I was a card company that had a contract with this ball player who just did a check mark or an X or whatever, I would um I would want my money back, because if you think about it, that player is representing your company. This is your company's name, right? And you put together this particular card, the design of the card, and it's kind of like, again, um, defacing the card in ways, and it's not showing the collectors any amount of respect, and it's not showing the card company any respect either when you do this, right?
I agree. Do you believe that autographs are going to continue to be a thing? I almost feel like they're going to start dying out over time because they're just there's nothing to them in my opinion.
Yes, and yeah, souvenir programs here. He says it exactly. It's unpersonal.
Personal, right? Yeah,
Right, and and I agree with you on that. Um, a lot of collectors. I watch Dustin, the personal sports card dad, and he talks about this too. And there's, I guess, collectors who like the on card autograph,
hmm,
and then there's collectors who they have a regular I don't know, a sticker autograph, right?
yeah.
And in both cases, I don't think it means a whole lot. For me, a lot of times I've gotten my autographs directly from the players.
It means
Um,
something.
Yeah, and it means a lot to me, because a lot of the players I knew personally, which is the reason why I have their autographs. Um, I think I think we've seen this in patch cards too, right? Where initially patch cards, they had the game worn patch, and now like nobody really liked them, but I guess that's another story. Um, Now you have like patch cards where the patches aren't even from, they're not game worn or anything like that,
Yeah, they
and
could be from anything these days. It seems like, and it's yeah.
it's and then here's something else too. Um, so he's concerned about the autographs, the stickers peeling over time. That
Yeah,
I would be concerned about that, and I'd also be concerned too that the autograph itself will
he,
fade into
right,
obscurity.
right.
We're already seeing it. Yeah, we're already seeing it, because autographed cards have been around for 30 years,
Yeah,
and the Sharpie has it's been around since 1964, but they've had a lot of problems with fading as well. Um,
especially depending on what you actually sign can cause it to fade out too. And you start wondering about these stickers that these players are signing. How is that going to hold up over time?
Right. It's unfortunately what I saw today, I found a lot of really disturbing things at this show. Not just that I didn't know who all the ball players were, but all the patch cards and the autographed cards were a dime a dozen. There didn't seem to be anything special about them,
Special, yeah.
and it was, it's like pigeons in a park, It's
You
just
use that term with the 87 tops, right? 87 tops baseball.
yeah, I do. I use that term quite a bit, and they for me, 87 tops were like pigeons in a park. I couldn't get rid of them,
Yeah.
and I the funny thing about 87 tops is that usually, when you're a kid
They
and
seem to
you collect
multiply somehow.
they do, and it's really funny because, you seem to have a lot of, younger collectors who are really in awe of the 1987 top set. For whatever reason, I don't like it. Um,
I think it's because when we were collecting them, they literally were everywhere.
eh,
I mean, they were everywhere.
you couldn't get rid of them. You absolutely the 86, the 85, the 1988, those sets you could not get rid of, and they're they're like stands in a mattress today. They're honestly, you can't get rid of these cards, and the 87 tops, for me there was a kind of a special set because I spent that summer completing it with my father, and so he started to tell me about the ball players, and he told me that he's it was a time when, and Wade Boggs here in Boston, um, a lot of people say he was a great ball player, and uh, I'm not going to really
He
dispute.
wasn't a great person, I'll just say.
No, no, he had his issues with Margot Adams,
Yeah.
and that was when my father kind of said, these guys are not people to look up to, and some players are, but they're the older players, Johnny Pesky and Bobby Dorn and the older ball players because they were in the neighborhood. But for the most part, that's when I kind of really realized that what we're doing is we're looking at a photo of one of our favorite players, but we're not kind of setting aside the fact that they are a human and they do make mistakes, like we all do.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why, we kind of uh, maybe still collect cards is to relive our childhood. And what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you can see a little bit in my card room here. I think a little bit. I was one of those guys who, I grew up watching sports in the 70s and the 80s was my big heyday. And I could never resist buying cards from that time period. It didn't matter if I already had them. I would see them because they were so cheap. I mean, they 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were just cheap. And I
Yeah.
would see them and I would just buy them because I just enjoyed them. And they just brought back a lot of memories of kind of collecting those cards and the players and things like that.
Yeah. We're getting back to this really quickly. The 87 top set was really kind of an homage to the 1962 tops baseball set. And I didn't know that growing up
Yeah.
until someone said it was 25 years to
There are a
to
lot
when.
of people that really love that set. I mean, the 87 tops. People love it. I've seen my fair share in 40 plus years of collecting.
I have too, and they've actually done a lot of reprints too of these cards. And a dealer was telling me today that he was having a really kind of a hard time with all this because you have reprints of older cards that are have the new players on it. So you think that you're getting an older card, but it's you have to turn around to figure out that it's a
Yeah.
brand new card. And there was So Jim Kelly, he's probably one of my favorite football players. Not just on the field, but what he's gone through in his personal life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he's a player that I would definitely put in my collection just because of everything that he's had to go through.
Yeah,
Um,
I think people would look at Jim Kelly a lot differently too if he had just broken through for one of those Super Bowls.
yeah,
Unfortunately, and it's unfortunate that sometimes people get judged for not winning a championship.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not really his fault per se. Um, let's see. I have a special place for the '87 Tops football because when I got
Mm,
back into the hobby in the early 2000s, I bought a box of $35 and cracked it. Yeah, everybody has a story like that
mhm.
where they'll go back as adults and go and buy the cards that they either couldn't get as kids, um, or in my case, I trashed my baseball sets when I was a kid, and I ended up grabbing my buddy's baseball sets from 1980 to '89. Um, and I do have my favorites, but when I look at these cards, these for me they're modern 1980s because
Yeah,
if it was, I don't think I'm old enough to be vintage,
yeah,
but
I'm with you.
um, yeah,
It's funny. It was such a long time ago, and like I remember when that kid gave me those 1956 Topps football cards. It was 1980. Those cards were like 24, 25 years old, and they seemed ancient at the time. They seemed absolutely ancient. Now,
yeah.
cards 25 years old are, I mean, it's crazy.
So it's funny that when I was growing up, I watched the movie Back to the Future,
Mhm.
and he goes, Marty McFly goes back to 1955, and this is 1985, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so old.
Ever
And
ago. Yeah.
and yeah, and then quite recently, I watched Quantum Leap, the new series, and he goes back to 19, I think it was 1989, and
Mm.
I was like, hold on a minute, and
That was
so
just yesterday.
right, exactly. I'm like, I remember 1989. What? Like that's not old.
Yeah.
So, um, but you realize that you've got at least two generations that were not even, weren't even born in like 2000, and they're learning about all this stuff,
Yeah.
and I think that getting back to hobby history, there's so much hobby history that's not being told, and um, it's fragmented, you know,
Yeah.
and it's you somebody has to piece it back together again. What I'm saying? It's not
A
in
lot of
one
work.
place. It's a
It's
lot of work.
to piece
It,
that back together because it goes back to the 30s, really, as far as organizing the hobby. And
yeah,
and there were so many, it- there was no YouTube, right? In the 30s and the 40s,
right.
and we're pretty lucky that we get to just kind of document our journey, and which is one of the reasons why I started a YouTube channel, just to kind of document it. And um, I wish I could go back and document from when I started, but obviously I can't. But yeah, there's a lot of history, and you and I think we're both kind of similar in that we could read those old like Sports Collectors Digest and baseball card news and stuff like that. We could spend our hours just doing that and be perfectly happy.
Yeah, yeah. And there was an article that I read. I hate reading out loud, and I'm not good at it, but I do this for everybody here. So there was an article that I read from 1980, I believe is 80, where a collector said that he didn't want to tell anybody that he was a card collector. He was an older guy,
Right.
and um, it kind of dawned on me that everything is cyclical, right? So,
Yeah.
um, not everybody that I work with knows that I collect cards. I have no problem telling people that hey, by the way,
Yeah.
I'm a card collector. Um, but for him, it was really difficult because he didn't think that anybody would understand
Yeah.
that a grown man would want to collect cards. Um,
And
and
some of those earlier guys really made it a little more mainstream. I think a lot of people felt that way, honestly.
yeah,
But you started getting these guys that would come together, and you realized that it was more than just a kid's hobby. But yeah, even in 1980, I'm sure there were people that didn't want people to know, oh, I collect baseball cards.
it's you know, if any one of those people from the Sports Collectors Digest, if they could see what the hobby was like now, or even Jefferson Burdick or Lionel, I know Lionel Carter had some problems with it as he aged.
He
Uh,
lived long enough to kind of see what it became.
he did, and he's one of the reasons why I became a writer of the hobby, if you will. Very influential to me, and I'm sure thousands of others. How many other collectors became collectors because they read one of Lionel Carter's articles, and or even anyone from uh, the Sports Collectors Digest, or maybe even Beckett. You know,
And it's funny that you touch on that because, these days it seems like you hear the term on YouTube a lot, influencer, right? And it's almost used as a bad term. And I get it. There are some people out there that maybe you don't appreciate the way they do things. But this influencer thing is not new, right?
no,
It's been going on forever. It's just it was a different
yeah,
medium, right?
yeah, it's all it is. And we're talking now on on a computer
Right.
and and which is really when my grandfather was a reporter back in the 1930s and early 40s, and his brother was in radio, and so it's all it is a different medium, and so like I think this is great. I think being on YouTube is great. I think having a channel is something that you would never have thought of could happen actually, probably even, in 10, 15, 20 years ago. You would never think of this being a reality. And so all it is it's the evolution of the hobby, if you will, because Jefferson Burdick, he is considered the father of the hobby for very good reason too, because he started out with nothing, and he really kind of relied on like the coin and stamp hobby that were established, and he had to establish everything for this hobby out of really kind of like thin air. And then the other thing too, Chris, is that you're dealing with a guy who knew he was going to die,
Yeah.
and he had a very debilitating disease or ailment, which was rheumatoid arthritis.
Mhm.
That really, from what I've heard, he was taking daily cortisone shots just to get around, and he was employed until he took retirement in 1959. But he was really on his, I hate to say it, he was really on his deathbed
Yeah.
in the late 50s. Um, and again, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be a writer. At least I wouldn't be writing about the hobby and
Right.
sports cards. And this
That's
is
how
kind of
come, and some of those early writers like Lionel Carter and some of those guys, I mean, they really did a lot to build the hobby. And again, they were influencers, right? It's
yeah,
not like they were definitely influencers, and people like Charles Bray, who was really big into starting modern auctions. He was one of the first to do auctions in the 19 mail order auctions in the 1940s.
Yeah, these guys were the first to do it, and they're not really talked about as much. I try to talk about them as much as possible and bring their contributions to light. And specifically with Lionel Carter, he was lucky just to survive World War II.
Right.
He had some very close calls, and he wrote about his experiences, but he never got to publish them, which is really strange because he had a 70-year career as a writer. Not everything is out there. Like I said, everything hasn't been pieced together, which I think is fascinating just to try to find some of this information.
You're probably a lot like me. I've spent hours and hours and hours looking for information on hobby history
Yeah.
because I love it. I mean, I want more information on the Buck Barkers of the world and Frank Nagy's and guys like that. I can't get enough of information on them, and it's pretty sparse.
Yeah, it is. I've really had to dig deep, and from if I couldn't find any articles that because these guys really kind of like kept to themselves from what I've been told. Um, I actually when I was writing an article on Jefferson Burdick, I found out that his college is still there. So I ended up uh, kind of getting transcripts
Mhm.
and finding out like a little bit more about him as a person and how he started the hobby. Now, the hobby was kind of founded over in England in 1927, but again, that's another portion of the worldwide hobby that we don't really know anything about here in the States.
Right.
So how how Jefferson Burdick uh, kind of like did this over his lifetime is really fascinating. And there's another guy too. There's another sports writer, Wirt Gammon Sr.
Yeah.
and he's really interesting.
Yeah.
He was a normal regular writer, and again like Lionel Carter, um, he had a fairly lengthy career as a writer, and these guys did a lot of research too. And it's funny because there's a lot of cards that they didn't know anything about, and that have only kind of recently, well, after Jefferson Burdick's passing, did they really kind of find them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's interesting with you talk about there not being a lot of the information out there on these people and not much documentation. But if you think about it, they had no idea what this hobby was going to become. This was just a small group of people that enjoyed the same thing. They had no idea it was going to become this $1 billion industry, right? They were just a bunch of guys that like collecting cards. And they probably thought the little checklist they were making, it was just something for them. And it,
Yeah.
they had no idea it would be used for generations and generations.
Do you think that they'd be happy if they walked into a card convention like the National? Do you think they'd be overwhelmed? Do you think they'd be happy with the prices or just the amount of cards or what's going on?
I think judging by what we've seen some of them say in the past, I would say most of them would probably not be happy. Um,
I agree.
it's interesting because it's kind of the same thing, right? Today you have the true collector versus the investor speculator, and but again, this is nothing new in the hobby. It's been going
Right.
on forever. You're very familiar with a Preston Oram, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people hated this dude because he drove the prices up. He
Right.
was like, I think in his early 60s when he first started collecting cards, and it seemed like it was just a purely financial thing for him.
Yeah, and Jefferson Burdick especially did not like them at all.
Yeah.
And what he ended up doing, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, is he sold his stamp collection
Yeah.
and he got into baseball cards and he was at every single auction
Running the
jacking up.
prices up.
Just yep, because
Just
he
had
had the
the money.
money.
And he was a
Yeah,
lawyer. He was a lawyer too, right? Wasn't he a
yeah,
lawyer? So
he
he
was
had money. Money was no object for this guy.
right.
And he didn't care. He wanted the cards, and you know, I think there was part of him that liked it, but I think he was also doing it. I think he saw potential value in them.
And one of the things that really bothers, I think, a lot of those guys was that Orem just as quickly sold his collection in about 1960 or so for a lot of money,
Yeah.
and and he did contribute to the hobby, and they consider him a uh, a pioneer. In fact, I have right up here his book,
Yes.
which I'm really kind of afraid to open up and really read because it's such a nice book,
Yeah.
um, and I am very glad that I got it, and I'm surprised actually that the condition that this thing is in.
Yeah.
But uh, there's there's another there's
Do you
another
know,
guy.
didn't he sell his collection to another one of the bigger pioneers, hobby pioneers? Do you remember who that was?
I want to say it was Woody Gelman.
Woody Gelman. Yeah,
Gelman? Yeah,
maybe
I
it's
want to.
possible.
I know that John D. Wagner sold his collection. I don't think he sold all of it, but I think he sold a good portion. I think he was out of the hobby by 1960. Um,
Okay.
but but Christopher Benjamin interviewed him in about 1981, 82 or so, and he said he still had just cards like coming out of the woodwork,
Mm.
and I wrote about him too. Fascinating guy. Um, and there was another guy too that I wrote about, and unfortunately I can't remember him off the top of my head. But
Walt Corson.
Walt Corson, there you go.
You did an article on him.
Yeah, and I was very shocked by I was sad really about
Yeah.
what I found out about him. But I I doubled because he said he was a minor league ball player, and it ended up not being true. And my thought on that was that you had some of the best researchers of their era in the hobby. Uh, Buck Barker and Lionel Carter specifically on baseball, and they never questioned this guy on his background as a first baseman for the Arizona State League
Yeah.
that had a I want to say it was like a three. He said he had like a 357 batting average from one year, and that he had an invite to the Yankees twice.
Yeah.
I I
No
think
record of it.
right. I looked and I had the Hall of Fame look as well, and they kind of said, "Yeah, this guy's a fraud." And he also said that, Corson also said that he was a scout for the Indians as well, and that not ended up being anywhere remotely correct. I just wonder why he would say stuff like that if, like
Well,
especially when they
there are people that will lie. I mean, and
yeah,
I guess in the time when he did it, he had no idea that he would ever be found out. That people would be able to check on these things like we are able to check these days.
yeah, or even Lionel Carter. I've actually heard too, and I think just by reading some of um, Burdick's letters to other pioneers that he didn't you Burdick thought this guy was a liar,
Mm,
and he didn't like him. He didn't like him at all. So it you know it's too bad, and I know that he had he was dying of cancer and he needed to get rid of his card collection. And he
yeah.
gave it to Frank Nagy, and I think Frank Nagy sold a lot of that collection off. Right. I was actually going to do an article on Frank Nagy at some point, and that Frank
That
Nagy's
would be
wife,
an interesting one.
yeah, his his wife almost she threatened to
Leave him.
divorce, yeah, leave him because he cleared out the bank account for this collection.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Took his car to go pick him up, and yeah.
And the springs broke on the
Yep.
car.
Yeah.
So, oh man. Anyway, I think we're gonna leave it there, guys. But Chris, tell everybody where they can find you at.
Yeah. So really, YouTube is the only social media I do. So uh, that's it, pretty much. Stories in cardboard.
That's great. That's great, guys. Everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
you're welcome. We'll have to have you on again. So, all right, guys. I'll see you later. Then we'll see you. Bye.